深たいピノキオOccultディズニー上のごとく下もまたシンデリーOccultディズニーショーをお楽しみください
Welcome to the Occult Disney podcast, where we're going to stop being podcast idols and go into podcast acting instead. This is Matt here. Over there's Thomas. How's your career?
Pop idols, which is I didn't realize that was such a specific term.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm just spitting that out, and I kind of forget that that's not how Americans say this, right? No, like in Japan, it's like, hey, what idols do you like? And they mean like pop stars.
It was weird because I couldn't tell if it was a translation thing. I was like, Matt's going to yell at me because I watched this one as an English dub and not the Japanese version with English subtitles. And they kept calling this chick a pop idol, which I guess meant like a music star. And she was trying to transition into becoming an actress. But to me, it was a little bit confusing because a pop idol is kind of both of those things. I don't know if that's an American thing or if that's a me thing, but you could be a pop idol and just do movies and TV, or a pop idol and just do music. And in fact, now more than ever, those roles seem a little bit interchangeable, where you've got, blockbuster movies that also just happen to star musicians that are on the top 40.
I should probably throw out, what are we talking about? We're talking about Perfect Blue, the 1997 Japanese animated film by Satoshi Kon. Okay, just to throw that out there in case someone just started listening without looking at the title of the episode, which I guess could happen. Maybe. I don't know.
And remind us, why are we talking about this movie on the Occult Disney podcast?
That's right. This one is definitely not Disney speed for animation, but it is Anime Annuary, where we're just I live in Japan. It seems like a good time to take a little detour. Last week Totoro was at least distributed by Disney, but Perfect Blue, yeah, that Disney's not going to touch this one. I think maybe in 20 years.
And I'm glad I didn't debate too much. I didn't protest, because this movie's been on my list of to watch, because it's been referred to in a lot of mind control and multiple personality syndrome sort of lines of research. This usually comes up and people were like, you got to see Perfect Blue. And I hadn't until now, and now I did. And I can see why it comes up so often.
Oh, yeah. And then like a lot of shots from this movie end up in Requiem for a Dream, where Aronofsky, like the biggest noticeable one's the bathtub thing, right? If you've seen Requiem for a Dream, where Jennifer Connelly's doing the same thing as she's flipping out. So...
You know what? I've come across that before, and I heard that, but I didn't even put that together while I was watching it. I kind of watched this movie in a complete bubble, because I was trying to see what it would have related to.
Yeah. Have you seen any of Khan's other films, like Millennium Actress, Paprika, and oh geez, what's the other one he made? He only made like 4 movies.
I know Paprika's also been recommended alongside Perfect Blue. I haven't seen any of them. This is the first of his movies.
Okay. Oh, you want to get deeper in? Yeah, Tokyo Godfathers, and then the TV series Paranoia Agent, which is practically your candle.
I think I've seen some of those ones, but I mean, it's one of those things that I just kind of put on and didn't pay close enough attention to.
Yeah, but so what was your take on watching this one? I mean, it's a nice breezy 120, so at least we're in the.
I do like it because it feels like a real movie, which has I don't know how else to describe this, but it lacks some of the stereotypical like anime plot lines, acting, like some of the traditional like motions that you would normally go through. It has like a non-linear feel to it. It feels like they also really use lighting and cinematography more so. Like there's not crazy sci-fi tech things going on. You don't have wood demons or any sort of supernatural element to it. It feels just like a really normal movie where they don't necessarily leverage the animation format to do these over the top scenes, which is usually one of the biggest benefits to doing something animated, is you can make things happen that would be impossible to do even with practical effects or CGI. But this one, in its credit, it makes it feel like just a straight up real movie. I assume someone has tried to remake this as a real TV show or movie at some point, right?
Kind of went in the opposite direction. This was originally a novel, like written in the early 90s, I think. And the plan for this was to be a live action film, um, because of how Japan works. Like, it was actually cheaper to do it animated. I feel like you wouldn't say that in the States, but because Japan was overworking people and kind of like sweatshop animation places. They're paid somewhat. No, they're not paid that well. Anyway, yeah, they have like such a animation grindhouse. It was actually cheaper to do it animated, and that's how it ended up that way. It was something called OVA, which I'm actually not sure what that stands for. Original video animation. So this was just supposed to go directly into like nerd shops in Akihabara. That's who was going to be watching this. The guys that are cheering in the film. But it found its way into a few film festivals and eventually got a real release and became like a real movie. So it's kind of a Pinocchio of an animation. It became a real movie at one point.
Right. Well, I was also going to say that's similar to like this Disney strategy where they assume that it's going to go one direction and they set it up to go that one direction, and then the ones that are supposed to just kind of be the follow-ups or the supplemental end up being the breakout stars against all odds, or at least against their planning. And I also, ironically, them cheaping out and doing it as animations probably the main reason that we're even talking about it now, because there's plenty of Japanese cinema that probably is just as worth watching, but that doesn't really get the mass appeal, because I think anime somehow makes it more internationally friendly automatically.
I mean, obviously there's been great Japanese movies, but in general,
Name one. No, I'm just kidding.
In general, the quality of, like, as a industry, Japanese movies are somewhat crappier than Hollywood movies, I think. Like, we just get the good ones in the States, but there's plenty of absolute garbage to watch. The ace in the hole for Japan is anime, right? It's like, well, what does Japan do better than anyone else? It's anime. Like, specifically anime. Obviously, other people can do animation or CGI animation or whatever, but like, people in America
are annoying kid voices. They got like a monopoly on that too.
Right. So you got that going. You said you watched in English. I almost thought about doing that because I watched this maybe 6 or 8 months ago, and I was like, well, maybe I could see what the dub's like, but it turned out that my copy had no dub, so it was still in Japanese.
It's still a requirement for me. I mean, I originally found one in Japanese, but I couldn't get the subtitles, so I had to end up doing the English version.
Right. So the idea of this movie was it was going to be made cheaply, go on to the kind of the smutty video shop shelves for a few months and then be forgotten about forever, which is what happened to a lot of movies in the 90s. Are you familiar with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure?
The name.
Okay. Khan had done animation or writing for it beforehand. I'm not quite sure what he did on there. Yeah, he wasn't a director, but anyway, he had done some work on the original video animation version of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Another one that was successful.
Remind me, was JoJo was like a space traveling rock star or something?
He might be in one because every series of JoJo has a completely different time and place setting. And
it's like American Horror Story.
Yeah, the main character is always something like, his name's like Jonathan Joestar, so his nickname's like JoJo. My daughter is super into it. My friends are super into it. I don't know that much about JoJo. The most I did is last February, we went to Tokyo to see the JoJo musical. So I did see a 3-hour live musical of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but I haven't watched the anime.
But well, maybe next year could be like JoJo January or something.
Maybe so. I think all the DVDs are in or at least of the first couple seasons are in the next room. There's a lot of JoJo though. That's like one you kind of would really have to dive into,
or just watch it on like 4X.
Yeah, just like mainline it, something like that. But although I don't know if the DVDs here actually have English subtitles because they are the Japanese DVDs. That's what my daughter got from the Blu-ray apocalypse. I keep talking about, where I bought like 100 movies for like $30. She bought like several series of JoJo. So that was her yield from that particular store closing.
Yeah, and I guess I'm never gonna get that extra nuance of watching it in the native language without any translation, even the subtitles for a lot of
Yeah,
these movies.
yeah, I need a little bit, like, because if I'm watching something purely in Japanese, like I'll pick up, words and stuff. But yeah, as far as like getting meaning and nuance, I'm not, so game to do that.
But it shocks me a little bit the way that you described that this movie was really just a cheaply made one-off that was going to go into like some, smut shelf somewhere, and then, just see its logical conclusion and the next one gets released. But it feels way too complex and developed to just be a quick one-off that was just going to go into a porn shop. Like, it legitimately seems like just as good in some ways as Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah. By the way, the wiki page just says a video animation for a narrow market. That's why I'm just assuming they mean smut shop. and in Japan,
Well, I mean,
like,
yeah, it seems like it would have been very controversial. Even as I was watching it, I had to go and find a pearl necklace so I could like clutch it a little bit in some of the scenes.
well, this is weird. I was about to say that, well, since it's based on a novel, it would be more complex, but it seems Khan didn't bother reading the novel, just read the film script and changed it a fair amount. So it's not
Classic Disney. We're back into Disney World right now.
except that Khan makes it more disturbing, it seems. Like, it seems the original was more like a straightforward, like, murder mystery thing, the book, whereas this one is just like psychologically intense. Like you said, it's got all those mind control signifiers. So it's kind of like, if Disney took a nice, sweet golden book and then turned that into like a real Grimm's fairy tale.
I mean, and just maybe a synchronicity, but the guy's name is Khan, and the best example I think of Disney doing that same thing would be the Jungle Book, which also has a Khan, does it not?
Yeah, if you want to get Japanese specific, this guy's Kon and that guy would be Khan, so you'd have a different sound
Well,
in the middle,
we're
but
talking
it's close
phonetically
enough.
here in good old
Yeah.
English.
But yeah, that's like you said, it's a synchronicity, so it doesn't have to have like an actual explanation, does it?
No, it gets those sweet clicks. So that's all you really need.
Okay, here the first plot was a simple splatter psycho horror story about an idol girl that is attacked by a perverted fan who cannot tolerate her image change. So I think we're go ahead and get into spoiler territory, but Rumi turning out to be this multiple personality murderer, is not, I guess, in the novel. It was more just a straightforward fan is stalking idol story.
Well, let me spoil it then. Let me spoil it from my point of view, since I just saw it today as for the first time, so it's pretty fresh. So all the spoiler alerts, that it's about this pop star or pop idol, sorry, pop idol that decides she wants to stop working in the music industry and get into acting, because I guess it's like this next level elevation of that. She describes feeling suffocated by being this pop idol. She makes that transition, but during that transition, the very first big role that she lands involves her in all sorts of compromising situations. I don't even want to say some of the words just so I don't have to edit this heavily later, but puts herself in situations similar to Jennifer Connelly gets put in Requiem for a Dream. So it's like working at a strip club, being assaulted by the customers there, being forced to do things that you don't want to do in that context. It evolves into her taking like adult boudoir photos for, I guess, like the equivalent of a Playboy or something even more extreme, like a Hustler or something in Japan at this time. And while all this is happening, her manager and her PR team are sort of pushing against it. They're like, we don't want you to ruin your image. We don't want you to go directly from being a pop star to being this like slutty pop star. And now, you kind of ruin all of your credit in the industry on both sides, music and Hollywood. And as this is going on, we also see a subplot where a super tall, jacked, weird, hills have eyes kind of Japanese stalker fan starts
Otaku
following
guy.
her around. Who was he?
He's the otaku, which is the dork, right? But that's kind of what they're going for. I mentioned Akihabara before, which, if you don't know, is a area of Tokyo that's just what's called Electric City because it has so many tech shops. But because it has so many tech shops, it also has the highest concentration of weird geeky dudes.
Right, and I think that in one of the things I looked up, they called him Memania or Me Mania. Like that.
Me mania is in the that's how it's written in the subtitles.
So this guy, Me Mania, who's this crazy style, and he's got like a Frankenstein quality to him. He's abnormally larger than other people, and his eyes are very spread apart, kind of like her agent is too, like Rumi is. But he looks like a monster in a lot of the different ways they portray him in this movie. So he kind of stands out from like physical deformity of some kind. But we've got this subplot of this guy that creates a sort of, I think, a fake website that pretends to be this pop star turned actress, Mima. That's what her short name is. So he puts a website together, and maybe not everyone realizes that it's not actually Mima, and she starts reading this website put together by this stalker. She's not sure he's a
Sorry,
stalker.
let me just jump in a little bit.
Did
it's
I
a
miss
little
something?
bit different. Yeah, it's a little different than that. Rumi is making the website. That's why Mima's room. That's why it has so many like disturbing specific details.
Okay, yeah.
And then
that's the ultimate spoiler.
Right, the stalker is interfacing with Mima's room. Like, he's not making the website. He's talking to the person.
Okay, so a website shows up about Mima, who is this pop star turned actress turned working in some very risque, taboo, like a TV series, I guess. And you sort of are led to believe that he's going to be the big bad in this movie, and that something is nefarious going to happen with him. But ultimately, the main spoiler is that really it's her agent all along. Her agent Rumi is the one that is so opposed to her doing this weird new role, and she wants her to just go back into being a pop idol. And the way that she sort of exhibits this is that she starts dressing up like her client Mima. Rumi starts dressing up as Mima as this pop idol version of her, and also I guess going out in the middle of the night and just murdering people that have crossed her. For example, the writer of the series, the photographer that took sort of like the adult photos of her, and then ultimately this stalker guy. But you don't really realize this because the way that the movie is playing out is that they're showing Mima sort of cutting in between her acting in this TV series to then waking up in her bed. And sometimes she's got like bloody clothes in her closet, or she's having these dreams where she's the one that's going out and killing these people. And it really blurs the line between, are we watching Mima doing something? You're not really sure. And they don't reveal that until the very end of the movie. Then they make it clear that it was Rumi the whole time, kind of dressed up as acting as Mima. It leaves a lot of questions, but that's the general premise of the movie. Pop idol turns actor, her agent freaks out, starts killing people, starts kind of messing with her mind, and then it sort of shatters her. And at the end of the movie, you're kind of questioning reality the same way that Mima is questioning reality.
Right. The last scene, though, I guess Mima is, it seems like it's a few years later. Mima's a proper star now and is just checking in on Rumi or something, who's completely had a permanent
like
psychotic
an insane
break.
asylum of some kind.
Like, the first time I watched the movie, I actually wondered if that was like a disingenuous ending, like Mima's. But then watching it this time, I was like, no, I guess that is actually like we are watching the reality of the ending. So, but I guess
I wasn't even sure if Me Mania was a real character, if that was also just something that Rumi had created. And I also wasn't sure if maybe Mima had killed somebody at some point, because again, it's not really clear. I mean, I guess if you watch it a few times and you read all the analysis and stuff, it does seem straightforward that Rumi was doing all the bad things. The stalker was a real person. Mima didn't hurt anybody, but somehow she had these memories of her hurting people, and that she was constantly blurring and waking up in the middle of the night and having no recollection earlier. And they don't necessarily say that Rumi was drugging her or hypnotizing her or doing anything particular, I guess the most conventional explanation is just that she was stressed out from the transition between being a pop idol into being an actress. That just that stress is what caused these temporary lapses of amnesia and maybe like false memory implanting. I guess that was my impression walking away from it.
Something else that makes the movie interesting, and this explains this requires me to explain idol culture, I guess, a little more, is that Mima's not that famous. You know, the what Chum, not Chum, that's not the Cham. There we go.
Cham,
Chum would be a terrible
Cham,
name.
which is kind of like
Chum.
Wham because it even has a little exclamation mark at the end.
Yeah, so the thing with that kind of like that group is not that popular. You know, they play at malls or small places to a couple hundred like weird dudes is the basic thing. They're like, what is it? Late in the movie, she's like, "Oh, they've made 83 on the pop charts. Wow, they're doing great." You know, which that means you're not that famous if you're impressed that they got to 83.
Right. They basically start blowing up after Mima leaves the group, and then they hit number 83 in the top 100. And she notes that when she was with the group, they had never been that successful. So that is them sort of rising up, which is adding, I guess, to some of that stress that she's going through of like, man, did I jump out at the wrong time? Is Rumi right? Is maybe Rumi was right that I shouldn't have jumped? Maybe I should go back to, but she really does stick with her guns. Like she really wants to be an actress. And maybe this is a Japanese culture thing you can also explain to me, but again, the difference to me between a pop idol and an act like a, starlet actress or something doesn't seem like that big of a leap here. I don't understand the perceived prestige between singing on a major motion picture and acting in a major motion picture.
Well, the thing with the idols, the pop idols, is they're supposed to seem like virginal and like, attainable for like they could be anybody's girlfriend, right? So there's been scandals in some of these groups where someone like, oh no, this idol has started dating someone, and then they're, the talent, excuse me, the talent company might fire them or something. It's crazy. They're supposed to like they're supposed to be like the, reflected images of Mima later in the movie, idol Mima. That's what they're supposed to be. They're not supposed to be like humans. And the sell-through date, I think, on being that kind of an idol is probably the upper limit's like 24, After that, you need to establish like a proper music career, or you need to transition to something like acting, which is what she's doing. So what she's doing isn't stupid. I mean, think about it. She lives in a 1DK apartment, a one-room apartment, in Tokyo. So she's not like rich or anything. She's, probably not that well off financially, to be honest.
Right, and I guess that makes it more pragmatic, the whole jump between the two. I get the closest version of this just at the tip of my mind is like maybe a Hannah Montana transition into Miley Cyrus if
See, it kind
Miley
of goes
Cyrus
the
had gone
other
into
way.
acting.
Right, it goes
Right,
the
she went
other
from
way with
acting to
Disney.
music, but yeah, imagine if you flipped that. It's the same thing where Disney needs you to be this virginal, like doesn't
Right.
smoke cigarettes, doesn't smoke salvia out of bongs on the internet, like none of that stuff.
All the 90s Mickey Mouse Club members,
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So this is sort of that transition, which
So we
makes
do it.
a little bit more sense, I guess.
Yeah, we do it the other direction. The other thing is, the people that are really into Even Stevens or Hannah Montana tends to be tweens, right? Whereas Cham is for these. Cham specifically seems to be for the geeky Akihabara crowd,
Older
right? That's where they're
dudes. Yeah, there's a
performing.
lot of like 30
Like,
and 40-year-old guys in this crowd cheering on these like 19-year-olds.
yeah, like you don't see any women watching Cham's performance.
Good point.
And then they're singing that bizarre song like I don't, I was listening to Japanese and reading the English subtitles, and it's just like this on the nose song, what like you can love me forever, you can have me, all that sort of stuff. It's just kind of creepy. Since 1997, I would say currently J-pop's doesn't seem like a lot of people are more into K-pop, I guess now, but especially 10, 15 years ago, one of their solutions for this kind of group, because, Mima leaving Cham's an issue if they have a following,
I'm waiting for L-pop. It started with J-pop, then it goes to K-pop, so L-pop comes next, which I assume is
Laos?
Lithuanian pop.
I went for Laos. Okay, closer.
Laos? Well, that would be
Laos.
V-pop, wouldn't it?
Well, that's next door. Yeah, Vietnam's gonna have to wait some time for their pop, I guess. Actually, they probably. I remember going to Vietnamese restaurants in the States and just like sitting there watching the musical performances that they taped in from Vietnam. Those are always fun. Kind of weird. Um, where was I? Oh yeah, their solution for someone like Mima doing this is by the late 2000s, these girl groups have like 50 to 100 members. So when someone graduates, remember they didn't say she quit, they said she graduated from Cham, so now she's going to go be an actress. But in these larger groups, the most popular was like AKB48, I think, where they had more than 48 members, and you'd see them on TV and there'd just be like a couple dozen girls dancing, and basically line dancing, I guess, except not country style.
But if we're talking music artists, right? Like, how does that even work? Does each song have like 4 people on it, and then there's like 20 songs on an album? Or
Yeah,
what?
there'll be like maybe 4 girls. 4 girls get a line, and the rest are basically just dancing and maybe going "hey, hey" or something like that. Like they don't have that much to do. The songs are written and produced usually by one guy. Um, so there's a famous producer, but he's not on stage with them or anything. So yeah, each of these bands usually have a producer writer associated with them. So it really is like it's idols. You're just putting these people on stage. There isn't a whole lot of art going on there.
This is like the story of Milli Vanilli, right? Where the writer and the producer came first, and they were just like, we can just hire anyone to do this.
Yeah, like for me, one of my favorite J-pop acts is called Perfume, and they've actually been around for about 20 years. They started off when they're like in their early 20s, but there's 3 of them, and they still play the big, the NHK New Year's show and stuff. And the thing they have going for them is their music's actually kind of cool. Like their producer's like a cool electronic producer, so the music doesn't suck, And then their performances have big light shows, like real psychedelic illusion and making light shows. So they've been able to stick around for 20 years, but a group like Cham's not. I mentioned AKB48, that's Akihabara 48. I don't quite know why it's 48 because they have more members than that, but you'd start to get these regional places. Like I live in Nagano, so they probably have like, I don't remember what the one here was, but it was like NGN 48, and they're not that popular. They maybe could make 83 on the charts if they're lucky, right? And they're just a regional thing. It's like, oh, there are little group. It's like our minor league baseball team or something.
How do you split those royalties anyways if you got 48 plus people in your band, right? Like
they don't make much money.
Right. Well, yeah. I assume that is the case.
Again, look at Mima. There's only 3 of them, and she's still living in a 1-room apartment. So,
that's a pretty strong plot line in the movie. They keep referring to how little money they're making, and that's another one of the reasons that she's breaking out of being a pop idol, because there's really not any financial incentive behind it. So I guess it's almost seen as a stepping stone to do something else.
And again, if she's say 19 in this movie, maybe a little older. Well, she's got to be older than 19 because 20 is age in Japan, or was at the time. So, she's 20, 21. She's got like 3 or 4 years of Cham left. She needs to find something else to do. So,
and I guess the juxtaposition of the movie is that she goes from this enforced virginal persona to the exact opposite. She flies all the way to the other end of that spectrum and doesn't pass go on the way there or anything, right? She goes right to being violated in a strip club with very explicit scenes, and she holds nothing back, and then starts getting photos taken. It almost feels like a reactionary pendulum swing from that cage that she just kind of escaped from as this virginal pop idol.
And I think they do a good version of also giving us the third Mima, which I guess we'll assume is the real Mima, the one at home or whatever, and going to the supermarket. Like they kind of have a third Mima, right? Like she doesn't have the multiple personality thing like Rumi does, but she still kind of does, right? It's just the other 2 are manufactured and she knows it. Whereas Rumi is just, having a psychotic break.
Right. Well, and I guess it does seem, though, that she is experiencing multiple personality disorder, because there's plenty of scenes, and maybe you can explain some of these, but there's scenes where she's by herself and then she'll look into a mirror, and usually we'll see this pop idol version of Mima in the mirror saying that I wrote this website and I said these things and I'm the real Mima and you're the fake imposter Mima and I'm gonna go back and do music and all these things. Like she has full-blown conversations with her. And I guess I'm wondering later, did Rumi, her agent, actually dress up as her and go to her apartment and have these real conversations with her and then just like bolt again? Or was she somehow telepathically hearing the things that Rumi really was doing through an imaginary version of herself?
Yeah, I was basically going with that as dramatic psychosis. It did occur to me that Rumi's just bolting in dressed up as Mima, which is hysterical and impossible.
I mean,
Also,
that's
I
what,
think
the
she
only part that
noticed.
makes sense.
Yeah, I think she'd still notice that Rumi is a middle-aged, slightly overweight lady and not Mima. Like,
I don't, maybe, but also the other part that gets winning, the movie hits a fever pitch of confusion intentionally, but they start doing these weird Inception style. In NLP I would call this a nested loop. This is like a story inside a story inside a story. But for example, her first role is in this. I'm gonna say it's kind of like a CSI style cop drama where they're investigating a serial killer that's taking women's skin off and wearing it because he wants to become a woman. It almost has a like a Albert Fish / Jeffrey Dahmer kind of feel to it.
Double
And
Bind is the name.
yeah, Double Bind is the name of this TV series that she's part of, but it's very specifically about serial killers doing like horrific things to people. And in this, she originally, I guess, is a regular girl that gets approached on the street by someone that's like, "Hey, you could be a model." So in the TV show, she's now a regular girl that is turning into a model. And then through this model trajectory, she ends up being in a strip club, and then she ends up getting violated in the strip club. But it's all this is this trajectory. But later on in the movie, when we see her, which again to me was confusing, but she actually goes to the photographer's house and like stabs him violently. Like it's actually a pretty awesome scene, probably the best scene in the movie. But she goes in there and like takes him out, and the next morning finds all these bloody clothes and stuff in her closet. And that one too, it's like, unless Rumi is telepathically beaming back to her exactly what's actually happening and then snuck in and hid her bloody clothes in that closet, it seems that she was somehow involved, somehow aware, somehow cognizant of this entire event happening. But anyways, so now she's living with the guilt of being a murderer because she thought she killed this photographer and perhaps even the writer. But she'll pass out. She'll go there. We see the scene where she's like stabbing the photographer, and then right before it ends, we hear, "Okay, take 3," as if she's now back on the set, and then she'll just wake up in her apartment. And that happens a few different times, all the way to the point where her co-star, who is originally a detective, now there's a version where they're questioning her, and they're like, "Oh my god, she thinks she's a music star. She thinks she's a pop idol named Mima." And she doesn't realize that she's created this whole entire backstory of being a pop star just to hide the fact that she was violated in this horrifically sexually violent way. She's kind of like suppressing this, and this is where the multiple personalities get in, but she's suppressing this horrific event by pretending to be a pop star turned actress. But then it cuts again and they repeat that, but now it's like, oh, she's pretending to be a model in order to pretend as if none of that violation happened. And that's where I think that is the most confusing part of the movie, is because they acknowledge, like, yeah, the movie so far and like breaking the fourth wall has been about her going from pop idol to actress. They acknowledge that, and then they kind of retcon it by redoing that scene, and now she believes she's a model. And at that point, like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't think she has any idea what's going on. And she verbally says that. She's constantly saying to everyone around her, like, is this real? Am I in a dream? Is this part of the acting? Like, I can't tell if this is pretend anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's all very intentionally disorienting. That's what's not in the novel, and that's kind of what Khan's bringing it is, that it's, you can't tell where the fourth wall is. you'll pour a 40 out for David Lynch. I watched Inland Empire a few weeks ago. That does the same thing where you'll have a real intense dramatic scene and that's okay, cut. It's like not it's not well, again, it's not, nothing in the movie's real, but this one is clearly not real in the narrative of the movie either. So that's the other thing here. When you say she's having conversations with Mima in the mirror and stuff, it's like, is that cinematic? Is she actually, like losing it, right? Because you assume Mima's losing it for most of the movie, and then it's like, oh well, if she is, her manager's losing it a whole lot more.
Right. She definitely is losing it because she clearly cannot tell the difference between reality and fiction, and if she's at the job or if she even ever was a pop star, if she's even an actor now. But again, it all hinges on, for example, I mean, there's some questions that I got that are probably easily answered. For example, she gets home one day and notices her fish are dead. And this is right after she reads on this online blog that talks about like the specific type of fish food that she bought at the market the day before. So she starts freaking out. She realizes that she's being watched very closely. So when she discovers the dead fish, originally you're like, oh, is this the stalker that did this? Who did this? Well, after the movie ends, I guess the implication is that Rumi, her agent, is the one that killed the fish because she's also the one that knew what she was buying and doing all this on the blog. So then the next question is, well, how did those bloody clothes end up in her closet? Were they actually in her closet? And if they were in her closet, it had to have been Rumi that put them in there. But then it's like, well, how did Mima have the memory of what happened in those bloody clothes? Because it's when she sees the clothes in her closet, not only does she know that there's bloody clothes, but she knows what happened in those clothes. So what's the answer there? This is like the biggest unexplained question, I guess, in the entire movie. So either Mima has a telepathic bond with Rumi, or Rumi took her along, or Rumi told her what happened while she was sleeping or something. But she absolutely had some sort of an awareness of exactly what happened in those bloody clothes.
Right. Well, I mean, at least for Rumi, like she's obviously in high stalker mode and she has a key, I'm assuming. Like,
yeah, so she's got the accessibility, but what she doesn't have accessibility to is, I think, to Mima's brain, to like plant specific memories in her brain about things that she wasn't actively involved in. Yet she has memories of doing these murders, and then she has the grief that goes along with it. And it's almost like she's like afraid of getting caught at that point. Like she had no control over these things that she thought she was doing for a TV show, and now she's like, oh my god, did I kill someone in real life, or was that part of a show? That's the part of it. But she did know that she killed someone, and that person that died really did die in the real world outside of the TV show version that they're going after.
Here, this is putting on the writer's hat, of course, but what I'm kind of guessing, I mean, sitting here being asked the question, is that Mima does the scene where she murders the guy, right? Rumi's offset, and then she cosplays those clothes, kills the photographer. So now, and then, since she's got the key, puts the clothes there. And so Mima's got this memory yesterday of wearing those clothes and killing someone on set. But then it's like, wait, was that me acting, or did I actually do that? Also, I've been, getting naked and doing compromising positions. So
not that this would improve the movie at all, but it would eliminate some of that confusion if there was just one scene where they show that Rumi was putting something in her drink each night to cause this weird amnesia, or this thing where she would just pass out and wake up in her bed and not know the difference. That would have made all of that clear. But again, like David Lynch wouldn't just make like an easy out like that either.
No. I'm looking at quotes that I wrote down. The best, I think this is the best quote in the movie. There's no way illusion can come to life. You should stop dreaming soon. I'm not even sure what that means, but I found it fascinating.
Well, that phrase about illusions coming to life is stated at least 3 or 4 times in this movie. That's probably the most recurring theme, is playing with this idea of, can your illusions come to life? And they keep saying no.
Yeah. So Rumi is basically mind controlling 2 people to a certain extent: the stalker guy, Mimania, and Mima herself. So and you were mentioning you'd heard this movie being a kind of a textbook case of signifiers of that. So what do you think Rumi is doing? What methods is she rocking for these two people?
Oh, well, I mean, this is classic Monarch style programming. It makes the most sense. And sometimes Monarch is conflated with Disney programming or like this pop star kind of thing. But a large part of that is based on starting with someone and inflating their ego to the point where they feel they're royalty or they're a pop star or they're some kind of famous actress or singer or something, like this inflated ego, because now you've got a larger than life persona. Imagine that even if you really are a pop star or you really are some, like, important person, that outward version of yourself is still a persona. It's still some kind of a facade that you have to be able to like put on like a hat and take off depending on the context. And that's kind of what Mima is struggling with this entire time. Like you mentioned, that like that virgin persona that she has to pretend to be for Cham, but doesn't want to be suffocated under that the whole time, because it is even though it's her, but that's a persona of her. So that's one aspect, is implanting this concept of a persona at such a rudimentary level. And then through trauma, which is the other part of Monarch, is that it's all trauma-based programming. The trauma of even simulated assault, the way like the violent strip club assault that happens to her. I think that's another implication, is that even though she's willingly doing this, everyone's stopping her. Hey, are you okay with this script? You realize what this is going to entail, right? Even even the person that is enacting this simulated thing on her, during one of the cuts, he's like, "Hey, I'm so sorry," and she's like, "No, it's okay. Like, I get it. This is part of the job or whatever." But even after all that happens, it shows her going back home, and she flips out. I think this is after she sees her fish are dead, but she absolutely loses it, and she kind of says to herself, "Of course this affects me. Of course I don't want to do this scene, but I feel like I have to do it in order to prove myself, in order to make sure that I'm not letting anyone down. All these, the director and the writer and the co-stars, like it's all hinging on me." So she feels forced into it. So the idea there being that even the simulated version of this very traumatic experience is just as potent for implanting memories or implanting programming into somebody. You don't actually have to do the full thing, as long as you just put the other person through the paces. And that happens a few different times in this movie, where she is being traumatized, and each one of those traumatic experiences results in her passing out and waking up again and not realizing how she got there, or being able to tell the difference between all these. This is essentially every time you break someone's spirit like that and you program a new feeling into them through a traumatic experience, then ideally, from the standpoint of being like the mind control programmer, every separate trauma can result in a unique personality. And again, in this movie, we see the model version of her, we see the actress version, we see the pop idol version, we see the normal version of her, and then we also see this perhaps like murderous imaginary version of her. So there's no less than 5 distinct personalities, which each would kind of be compartmentalized by each individual trauma she goes through.
I guess what's kind of interesting here is because the typical, conspiracy theory rant is like, here is this, organization like doing this and weaponizing it. It's interesting here that's the studio system causing the trauma, and then the talent agency kind of weaponizing it and using it to her own advantage to do the actual mind control part.
And personally, I think this is also an interesting correlation, that in the TV drama that they're acting out, where it's tracing the serial killer, it's about someone taking someone else's skin because they want to become them. And that's kind of what Rumi's doing. She's not literally taking Mima's skin, but she's definitely taking on the persona and acting as if she were Mima. She puts up the blog, she puts on her clothes, she goes out and acts like the virgin version of her as the pop idol. So she also is doing the things that the serial killer is doing in the show that they're shooting.
I assume Rumi was going for her skin in the final sequence of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, that it was definitely leading to an escalation. It wasn't just going to stop at like a Selena story. It was going to be worse than Selena.
Right. She wasn't like, like I'm going for your skin, but you could assume that might have been the end goal there.
Oh, well, I mean, it was escalating. Every single thing that she was doing was leading to more and more. And again, maybe I don't know if this was intentional, but her and the weird Frankenstein stalker dude both had a weird like space between their eyes. I don't know if that they were supposed to share that in common to like show that the same way that Disney or classic Western animation will give someone a humpback or a crooked nose to kind of imply like, oh look here, like we're gonna telecast, here's a bad guy.
I think that's pretty much how they were going for it, because Me Mania, just like you said, looks like Frankenstein's monster or something. He just looks completely bizarre. Rumi looks a little off, right? But and then once the reveal comes, it's like now she looks kind of like weird and terrifying. So
She looks like she could have been kicked in the head by a horse when her skull was still soft.
yeah, really. I think did they say it implicitly in the movie? I believe it's implied that she was an idol of her own, 20 years previous. Like she was
Oh, I
also
totally missed that. That would make
this.
even more sense.
I don't think I'm making that up. But yeah, I believe the idea is like she actually used to be Mima. She can't really be anymore. So, okay, I'm looking at the wiki plot, which calls her former pop idol Rumi Hidaka. So, maybe I need a wiki to tell me that, and the movie doesn't do it enough. I don't know.
I mean, this is really, really complex though. Like all these interwoven stories and the Requiem for a Dream reference and even like the Inception sort of feel to it. It still blows my mind that this would ever have been considered for just like a niche little market.
Well, that's I guess why Khan got to make a few more movies before dying way too young. But um, another thing this movie does, actually, there's all the internet stuff with the message board and stuff, and this is 97, so this is very early in internet, and they kind of get it right, I think.
Yeah, I mean, pretty prophetic because I don't think AOL hit their million users, which is a laughably tiny number, right? Like that's a huge milestone for that, but that was a million people on the internet is nothing. There's probably that many people watching like a Mr. Beast video on some good days, right? But
Yeah.
that was like 93 or so. And
That's
if this
probably
movie came
lowballing
out
it.
in 97 or 98, we're talking 4 or 5 years, and they have nailed the 4chan incel demographic like to a T on this. But maybe again, maybe Japan was just like on like they had their thumb on the pulse of internet creepos at that point.
Yeah, well, hey man, you can still take a walk through Akihabara and you feel a little weird. I think I've gone on the train otaku story before. Yeah, maybe not on this podcast, where I was at a train platform, and one week there's a kind of weird looking guy, kind of like a Me-Mania sort of guy, making train announcements on the platform. He doesn't work for the train company or anything. He's just there because he likes trains and he's memorized the announcements. The next week, I'm there again. Another guy's doing it on a different platform. And the week after that, they're both there competing against each other.
I haven't heard this. No.
Okay. And I've been on a train and I've seen a guy muttering to himself. And this is just a few weeks ago. The guy was saying the train announcements about 5 seconds before they came on. Like he knew exactly when they were going to come on. He knew exactly what the announcements were. And he would say them himself 5 seconds before they played over the speakers. So that's the level of torque we're talking about here. That's those guys getting that obsessed about trains, because that means you have to just, okay, now I see that house, now I say it, and then they're gonna say it. It was weird. It was the recordings were repeating after him, but you got to just memorize where all, and you can do that. It's Japan. All the stuff works like clockwork. So you if you remember all the points, you can do it. But it's not like I think it was being supernatural or anything. But it is weird, and it's weird to put that much attention into something. And the fans of Cham are putting that much attention into Cham. The Me-Mania's got just what Mima like plastered all over his walls and his little computer cubicle.
He's a super fan. These are the guys that end up spending all the money to buy like the top tickets to go to like a weird team, like a Taylor Swift concert or something, or they're the people that buy the $30,000 VIP suite. So she kind of is obligated to do a meet and greet, and that's always like an awkward moment where it's like I kind of have to like say hi to this person because they're basically funding a large portion of my fan base, but also what a creeper. Who the hell is spending 30 grand to do this? I feel like that's a normal aspect of this kind of fame.
Right, but again, you threw out Taylor Swift. So if you meet someone and they said they did that, you're like, oh, I guess they really like Taylor Swift. But in the case of Cham, chances are most people don't know who Cham are in Japan, right? 83 on the charts is their big breakthrough. So they're not well known. So it's not like other
Bro,
people.
he's getting in early on the ground floor. That's all it is.
Yeah, but how many groups did you get in early on the ground floor and they never went anywhere? You know, that's also super common. People getting obsessed with these groups and they just kind of sputter out. I mean, it's like, hey, it's like getting into a podcast. You know,
yeah, I also assume now too that all those guys muttering the train stops, they go back home and they cross dress and murder people at night because that's the logical conclusion for
that's of course the
weird
logical
Japanese
conclusion.
people.
Yeah. No, they leave the train station. Then there's a little machine where they can buy little die-cast model trains and play with those at home.
They're feeding into the fetish.
Yeah. Hey, walking out, it's like it's 2 drink machines, and then this one little machine. They're always changing out to have like little weird collectibles. It's not one of the ball machines. It's a different thing. But and then
You get panties and train parts from the same thing.
The prayer machines. You know, we were at the mall a few weeks ago, and it was like a store just of the little, bubble machines, right? And some of it's
like
weird stuff.
Go-chew machines or something.
The vending machines and things come in little plastic bubbles.
Right.
Yeah. And it got weird. There was probably about like maybe a couple hundred of them in this store. And some of it was like little plastic recreations of like 90s and 2000 era internet routers. So you put your 300 yen in, and you wouldn't know which one you'd get, and you'd get one of 5 tiny recreations of internet routers from 20 or 30 years ago. That's how weirdly specific some of this stuff gets. What else did I see? There was you could get little miniature boxes of famous snacks and candies. Of course, it was just a model of it. It's not actually the snack or candy.
That's actually really big now in the States. Even they've got, this is like a big thing, is miniature versions of products where it'll have like a little miniature version of, say, like a Barbie, all the way like a box with plastic on it and a little miniature Barbie inside of it, and then toys and candies and stuff. Yeah, I don't understand the allure of buying a miniature version of a thing that just stays in its package, but I don't know. I guess it's like a cute thing.
I think they probably got that idea from the Japanese vending machines.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, very likely that was one of the trends that goes opposite, because Japan does interestingly drive a lot of the collectible markets in the West. Like the same way that the West movies might have a huge influence, I feel that the collectible markets in general are bigger in Japan than almost anywhere else. And that's one way that they're also influencing the West.
It does depend on what, say genre or what specific thing you're looking into. Again, if you're trying to look for Star Trek and collectibles in Japan, no, that's not happening. That stuff's coming from somewhere else. But,
right, but that's an IP. But like a trend would be like the squishable trends, or these miniature product trends, or a lot of other like formulas that you could apply to any IP.
Yeah. Actually, the reason we were in that store, my daughter wanted to see an anime in the theater, Nintama Rantaro or something. It's the Ninja Kids. I think I mentioned it, but yeah, she was like, oh, I want to get a Ninja Kid, like a little plush Ninja Kid. So we were like, maybe we could find a figure in one of those machines or something, like a keychain. The only way you could get them was the claw machines, and I suck at the claw machines. So she tried a couple times, then I tried, and I was like, yeah, we're not getting it out of the claw machine. Are you good at claw machines?
No, in fact, some of my favorite videos are very unethical. I'm not advocating for this, but people that bring these high-powered magnets to the little claw machine things, where they'll just like hook things from the outside. And even there was one, I'm sure most of these are fake, but there was even one where they get the claw machine claw over the drop receptacle, and they are able to get the magnet up on the claw. So now anywhere the claw goes in the machine, as soon as it just gets close enough to something metallic, if it's a keychain or an iPhone or whatever, it just sucks up to the claw. So they're just like cleaning shop. I'm pretty sure that would technically classify as like grand theft if you use that method to win like an iPhone or something. But those are some of my favorite videos of seeing people like beat the house, because I worked for a long story short, but I worked for a couple game companies and like casino type companies, and it blew my mind to know that those claw machines generally have like a setting where they'll give it a setting that one in every, I'll just make a number up, but one in every 30 grabs, the claw will actually retain its force. But for those other 29, even if you nail that thing right on, the claw arms are just programmed to stay springy and to not pick anything up. So it's not only is it a game of skill, but it's also a game of chance, more so chance than anything.
Right, right. No, I got a friend in Japan. I mean, he's American, but he's like, yeah, I'm really good at the claw machines. And then another friend just kind of whispered to me, yeah, he just spends a lot of money.
Well, that's what it is. If you spend enough to play it 60 times, you might get 2 or 3 wins in there, because you'll probably develop enough skill to know when to hit the button and how to time all the things out. But it also has to align with the built-in internal. It's a very real setting. Like if you go to 5 different, like Denny's used to have them, and almost every single Denny's they would have a claw machine right by the door, in and out. And there was an actual setting where you could go in there and say like every 10 pulls or every 30 pulls or every 50 pulls to make the arm not lose its sort of grip. So I mean, it was down to the point where anyone would be like, yo, go change the claw machine, make it twice as hard, because we're gonna have a lot more traffic today. So I don't know, seeing that part behind the curtain, like I don't feel bad if anyone scams their way through one of those claw machines.
But I do like the idea of the teenager working at the arcade drags you into the back room and beats the crap out of you, casino style,
Right. Yeah. He's got like the little quarter belt on him.
Come on back here. We know what you've been doing. That sort of thing. Well, let's crack into a few more notes, I guess. If you have anything on yours you would like to dive into.
Yeah, well, I mean, the multiple personality and the dissociative identity disorder thing, I think that's probably the main reason people recommend this movie, and because it's this transition from like a Disney-esque pop star into doing like adult work, which is also a recurring theme when it comes to this Project Monarch mind control programming. But that would leave out, usually there's a reason for that. It's not just to deteriorate like an actress so that they're no longer anything. Usually these are, one of the examples would be like beta sex kitten programming. This is kind of like the Sparrow movie, where they've got Jennifer Lawrence is like this Russian spy / like sex pot honeypot that if you get too close turns into a Black Widow kind of deal. Well, if this were to be applied to Perfect Blue, then it would almost go to speak that if she were being created to be this MPD DID person, that it would be in the efforts for something bigger. So let's just say for a second that Rumi maybe is crazy. Rumi maybe does kill her stalker, but also open up the possibility that Mima also is killing people, because she really does exhibit multiple personality disorder. She actually is going through real traumatic experiences, simulated or not. She's going through that. So I don't think there's any real debate that she is potentially becoming this, multiple personality person. And in order for that to actually have a practical effect, if someone were orchestrating that, it would be to turn her into an assassin. Like she's actually going to kill someone. So maybe part of this, if you were to watch it and ignore all the Wikipedia breakdowns, that someone wanted to take that photographer out, or someone wanted to take the writer out, and this was a really convenient way to do it. But I mean, it's too complex and too blurry to like say that that's what's happening. But if this were a Project Monarch movie, that would be the natural conclusion.
I mean, Rumi's like Manchurian candidating Me Mania almost by chance or by accident, I guess she is actually corresponding with him though as Mima, so that suggests a little more intentionality. That's also the thing, I think, why the last scene of the movie is like weirdly unsettling, because we're getting a new Mima, right? and this is a super famous Mima. Everyone at that sanitarium is like, oh my God, is that really her? You know? And then she acts completely differently. You know, it's like all of the trauma this movie has reprogrammed her into. Now she's like, she did that, but now she's like the classy star, because the nurses aren't like, oh, ooh, that smutty actress. They're like, ooh, she's like one of the most famous actresses in Japan kind of vibe, you know, like we respect her, we like her.
Yeah, I guess she gets the respect that Jennifer Connelly never necessarily achieved, although she's been awesome in her later roles. But I don't know if everyone would recognize it at an old folks sanitarium. That's especially impressive that people in a insane asylum would be like, "Wow, I'm snapping out of it and recognizing who this person is."
Right, but I mean, not to dwell completely on the last scene, but did you pick up on that just being like kind of a different person? I think that's why it threw me off the first time, because it is supposed to be sometime later, but it's like, this is a different person than we've been spending the movie with.
I mean, I guess it just made a lot of sense to me because, again, she already has multiple personalities in the movie itself. So it would make sense that she's just adding on to those over time because each one is basically protecting the previous one. So whatever normal version of her exists now, it kind of exists in that normal fashion in order to protect the previous. She has fully integrated all of these different personalities, and I don't know if that's a technical term, but usually in this like mind control conspiracy sphere, that's the term used to like reverse this weird trauma-based programming, is that you would slowly integrate each of those personalities, and the way that you would do that is you would sort of hone into one of those either through trauma or through just being intentional about it, and then slowly introduce them to the other personalities until they all fold back into the one main personality that comes out again.
Yeah. I guess one of the interesting things about this movie is it shows that as a symptom of the system. It's not like there's some guy in a dark office orchestrating it all. It's like, and then like you said, everyone's like, oh, are you sure you're okay with this? No, she's not. Do you really want to do this? No, she doesn't. You know, it's like a symptom because you just used the word intentionality. I feel like there's not much intentionality going on, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's structured that way, and I think that's probably one of the cooler, wider approaches to this, is that just the fact that like Hollywood would do this, or Japanese version of Hollywood, but that getting into acting can put you into these situations, and you're living through these very real scenarios that you can't just completely turn it off, or if you can, maybe that implies you're already been traumatized by some other previous experience. But essentially, even if you're completely normal, even if you come out of it on the other end, there's a chance that for that temporary scene in which something horrific is happening to you, you probably are disassociating. You probably are putting out this proxy personality to kind of deal with that, because even being in the moment and just reminding yourself, this isn't real, this isn't actually happening, that probably would not make the best performance, because you actually have to be performant and act as if it were all real, right? So in order to do that, you have to create this persona. So I think that this is like beating over the top of the head, but it's not like they're hiding this fact that Mima is intentionally creating these different public personas for all these different reasons. And I guess the trauma that she goes through is just emphasizing that. But if anyone's programming Mima, it's probably Mima herself, and she's willingly doing it, like, acknowledging that she's doing it.
And I mean, it's like, even if it's even if it's like a nicer role, like less sex and violence or whatever, I've got my Trekkie friends. One of them did an interview with Nana Visitor, who played Major Kira on Deep Space Nine. The point being, she was, it's the darker of the Star Trek shows, the 90s, and she was like a hardcore character, if you're not familiar, blah, blah, blah. But she was talking about when she did the role for 7 years, she would have dreams where she was her character, like in the prison camps or something, or, she just, especially in dreams, just like that character would start to kind of infect her life, and that's not even like as disturbing as the stuff in this movie. And that's a real life example,
This is also, I always find the best way to shoehorn in satanic panic concepts, but in the satanic panic, I think people now maybe look back and joke about this aspect a little bit about how the satanic panic critics would point to like Dungeons and Dragons, and it's like, oh, if you play Dungeons and Dragons, you're inviting the devil right into your living room. You're going to lose your kids to Satan if they play Dungeons and Dragons. And it's not all reactionary because it's just like, oh, they're talking about magic and wizards and that's evil, that's anti-Christian, so that's why the devil's coming. It really is because of that extra role-playing aspect of Dungeons and Dragons, where someone goes into a basement and they like literally transform themselves depending on how much they get into it, and they are like a bloodthirsty warrior, or they are some dark mage casting these real spells. And if you do that enough over time, I think that some people recognize that you can change the way that your brain works. And maybe that is a risk. Like you actually could be risking little Johnny's soul, not because God's angry and Satan's going to snatch him up because he believes in magic, but because they're role playing at a formative time of their youth, I guess. And now they're like opening themselves up to this other magical thinking. I mean, I'm not saying that Dungeons and Dragons will make you evil or give you multiple personality, but that there is something slightly more nuanced and complex than just, if you talk about dragons, then God gets mad and you go to hell. It's actually that you're opening yourself up to this programming and alternate way of thinking, and that was part of the real danger and the panic of the satanic panic.
Yeah, I mean, to put in another term, like you're playing like a dumb match 3 game or something on your phone, like a casual game. You go to bed and then you stay awake an hour, like playing it in your head. It's that kind of thing. Like, why am I still doing Tetris? I'm in my bed, supposedly going to sleep, and I'm playing Tetris in my head.
In a not so previous life, but yeah, as a software engineer, there were times when I was working on one specific project nonstop and just coding for 12, 14-hour days, to the point where, and this would happen often enough that it was like, oh yeah, that my brain's doing that thing again. But I would do things like stand up equals true before I would stand up, and it would be like walk dot to equals refrigerator, or like, like me dot drinking equals true. Like every action I was happening in real life, in my brain, it was like writing code to make it make sense about what was happening in this external world, even to the point where like me sleeping, like my dreams would be about these things, like stating logical things. Like I'd have to write the code in my dream to understand what was happening. Yeah, they call that like Tetris brain too, I think you had mentioned. But it's like, if you focus on one specific pattern for too long, now like your body starts to just force everything into that pattern, your mind rather.
Now I have a different one that happens when I wake up sometimes, which I guess maybe most people do this, or maybe I'm losing my sanity. But like I have a dream. I don't even remember what the dream is, but I'm half awake in bed doing some weird repetitive motion, like it's a task or something, And then at
This
some
is
point,
new
like,
to me. No, I'm not familiar with this.
yeah, like I'm moving my leg in like some kind of sequence, like because in the dream I'm like performing a task, and then I'm awake, waking up in my bed. I'm like, why am I doing this weird repetitive motion? It feels like I have
Have
to
you
keep
ever
doing it.
seen the OA?
No, I haven't.
The OA is, I think it was like I can't remember what series it was on, FX or something, but it basically is following this Carlos Castaneda movements thing, where if I can oversimplify, the general premise is that we're all magical and we've got magic energy and it builds up over time, and that the spaces in between your body, like inside your elbow and between the webs of your fingers, is where all of this latent energy kind of like falls into, and it just collects like belly button lint or something. And that if you can move the energy out of these latent spaces, you can almost like form like a ball of energy or intent. But if you do these very specific motions in a certain cadence and in a certain order, that you can basically break like the time space barrier. You can astral project, you can travel in time, you can do all of these crazy things, like these supernatural abilities, all because you're able to like use this sort of latent energy out there. So I don't know how I think that just relates to that particular topic.
It kind of does, because it's something I was doing in my dream, and sometimes I do feel like I'm doing a task in my dream, right? Or something, right? Sometimes my dreams feel like I'm up to something in the other realm and that I can't quite figure out here, and that's why I'm like kind of confused doing it when I wake up. I mean, I'm not doing anything horrible or violent. Like I said, it's usually just like moving my leg, or even just like having to continue through this thought cycle. Like, I think of this and I think of this. I can't explain it now, because once you're fully awake, you've completely lost
Right. No,
whatever the
I
hell it
get
was you're
that. The
doing.
logic disappears. You don't understand anymore. There have been a few times that I woke myself up punching or kicking, or like I had to kick someone in a dream, and I ended up kicking my girlfriend. Not
Oops.
hard enough to like be bad, but it woke both of us up. And so yeah, sometimes it does carry over in those weird ways.
The most fun was my university girlfriend was a lifeguard or whatever, and this is before the Adult Swim was a big thing on TV. This is like 2000, but I think somewhere at like 4 a.m. she just suddenly shouted Adult Swim at the top of her lungs. So what the hell? Yeah, so that was kind of fun. But yeah. What the dreams infecting reality, which we get here. I wrote pop pop fizz fizz in my notes. I guess she is. I'm just thinking, going back here, like maybe Rumi is drugging her, because they do have some specific shots of her taking some medicines or something.
Okay, that wasn't an Alka-Seltzer reference.
Well, it was an Alka-Seltzer reference. I'm just looking at my note now, thinking about what you said earlier. Here's one thing, just for the sake of conversation, the idea to become a true star, which at the end of the movie, Mima is a true star in Japan. You've got to sacrifice someone. Is that Rumi? I mean, until she tries to murder her, I guess they're close.
Kind of. Although, I mean, the sacrifice would make more sense for the 3 people that actually gave up their lives in this indirect path of
Yeah, but they weren't close to her, right?
right, but they don't have to be close. A sacrifice doesn't have to be close to you. It just has to be a sacrifice that you are claiming and using for some other good. It's a release of energy that you're then repurposing. And I guess that all 3 of those people did in fact lose their lives to Mima in stardom. And I don't know the whole backstory because it just jumps forward in time. But you would assume that if Rumi was caught and this came out, now all of a sudden this actress, which was normally just some unknown pop star that is now acting, now it's like, oh, but she's also this chick that's surrounded by these 3 murders, and there's all this extra sort of like mythology that gets built around her. Like
the double bind rates as a cursed production, I'm sure.
Right. Well, and that itself, like, that's buying you marketing that you wouldn't be able to buy that kind of marketing. And now she's getting it for free thanks to Rumi. So if anything, Rumi did her job really well. She was an amazing agent / PR person, because she put Mima on the map.
Right. At the cost of her sanity. I do also find it interesting in the end where the nurses say, "Oh, the real Mima, not Mima, the real Rumi comes out every once in a while." Just like that. That's disturbing. Like, hey, where am I? What's going on? And then who is the real Rumi, the psychotic one? Who is that? Is that just Mima? Mima.
Yeah, how would they know? How would they even know which is the real Rumi out of all of the different versions?
Yeah, just because she tells you that. But yeah. Anyway, that last scene is like the first time I couldn't quite work it out, and now I'm still not working out. But it is seemed to be kind of the key to the movie in some ways.
Well, I mean, she really does. Like, those sacrifices did work. So if anything, maybe deep down she realizes that she owes part of this new life that she was so set on getting to Rumi. Like, if Rumi hadn't done any of those things, she probably would have just been a walk-on one time for this show, and that would have been the end of it.
Rumi's mistake was becoming a talent manager instead of becoming an enka singer. I guess that's something you can do if you're no longer a pop idol. Do you know enka?
Paul Anka.
Not Anka, enka, which is like 50s, 60s Japanese pop music, but it's still, well, it's popular with old people. Kids don't like it, but think of the Japanese music in the Kill Bill movies. That was enka. So just that super melodramatic love song thing with lots of orchestration.
So if you're in Japan, I guess maybe this applies to you too, or maybe you have to actually be like full-blooded Japanese, but do you just turn 50 and you start liking that music? Or is this going to be a situation where like 50-year-olds in the next couple years they're just going to be listening to J-pop, and Enka's completely out of the window.
I'm not sure. When I go to work, I walk by a store. It's been there for probably 50 years, and it's selling cassette tapes, mostly cassette tapes of Inca singers. They got some CDs too, but it's mostly cassette tapes. And then they're selling like clocks, small clocks. It's a really weird store, but it's I guess it's very much geared to older people. So I'm not sure when that store goes out of business, maybe I'll start wondering if Inca's dead. Um, the I think I mentioned Kohaku before. That's the New Year's Eve program, 4.5 hours long. Of It's male artists versus female artists. If it's a band, they'll go with whatever gender the singer is. But yeah, it's one song after another. It starts off with a whole lot of J-pop, and then Enka starts slipping in, and by the end of the night, it's like wall to wall Enka. So it's like, okay, now we're getting back to Japan's roots or something like that, and they'll have these big, lavish, weird productions of Inca singers. This past year, we actually noted they seem to balance it out more this year, where it was like kind of like the same throughout. So, or as past years, it would kind of shift. It's like, okay, we're getting
It'll get phased out eventually. It's the same way that like classic rock or real golden oldies are kind of getting phased out, and now you'll hear Linkin Park or Nickelback or Offspring or something on like a classic rock station here in the States. Like it is going to end up pushing some of like what was originally classic rock out of that, because now old people are going to be listening to Fred Durst.
Well, I assume it just like time has already pushed out the stuff that people really don't care about. I feel like Led Zeppelin or the Beatles will still be played for a while, but the Dave Clark Five's already been forgotten, despite basically
or Paul Anka. Paul Anka
or like the James Gang or something. Like who listens to the James Gang now? Other than maybe a big single or something. The Guess Who, you listen to the Who, but who listens to the Guess Who other than their one big hit? But they were a big band in the 70s, right? So that's probably the way. The funny thing is, when Kill Bill came out in America, we were all like, oh, that music's so cool, because it was in the Tarantino movie and all that. Meanwhile, in Japan,
I think that was partly scored by RZA too, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, but it also had a lot of needle drops. So the soundtrack's great, by the way, both of them on vinyl. But yeah, the RZA does like little 1-minute things, and he put the thing together, but it's not like a RZA album. Kind of like a My Bloody Valentine's Kevin Shields and the Lost in Translation soundtrack. He only made about like 6 minutes worth of music for the soundtrack, and then it's a bunch of like curated songs.
I think Ghost Dog was very similar to that. I don't know. Have you ever seen Ghost Dog before?
Like when it was new. But it's been a while, and I'm mixing it with Alpha Dog. No, I have not seen Alpha Dog, but yeah, and see, you put out 2 dog movies, you're gonna mix it up in your head. So yes, I've seen Ghost Dog. I have not seen Alpha Dog, but I don't remember Ghost Dog. I remember liking it.
You can live without seeing Alpha Dog.
Yeah, I've lived.
You can't live without seeing Ghost Dog. Everyone has to see Ghost Dog at least once.
Okay, I've seen it at least once, but yeah, I don't. I remember what the DVD box looks like pretty clearly, but yeah, that's about.
Well, it was another example that RZA basically did the score. And he had involvement with the soundtrack, but the soundtrack was needle drop, but it was needle drop from pretty much all Wu-Tang affiliate groups as well. And I think that was one of his first forays into scoring movies, both soundtrack and the score, which led to him doing Kill Bill.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the coolest segue from a pop career that we have in the States, at least. You got Oingo Boingo, you get Danny Elfman, you get Devo, you get Mark Mothersbaugh, or I don't know how to say his name, but the RZA from the Wu-Tang. That's kind of a cool way to soundtrack. Kevin Shields only did that one movie, but he should have done some more, because that's a cool soundtrack.
Well, I mean, I guess we have a similar ladder here, where you would start in music and then work your way into Hollywood, but then usually the last step is you get into politics. If you can get all the way into politics from that route, that's usually like, it's not a reverse. Usually you don't see politicians getting into movies and getting into music. It usually happens the other way. And then I think it's just how much money you make. You probably make more royalties with movie credits, and then you make even more royalties, taking people's money and fleecing them through the tax system.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're not getting it through the actual salary of those positions. Do you want to hit anything else big in your notes? I think I've pretty much got out most of the things I wanted to say in mine.
So out of all of the movies by this director, is this the one to see, or is it Paprika, or is it some other one?
It's all four.
You gotta watch them all. Okay.
He only made 4 movies, and none of them suck. So, all of them have people that would say it's the best one. I mean, yeah. Paprika, that's the one I've heard the most criticism on, and the criticism for that is just it feels like a really good TV pilot. So I guess the point is it seems like something that's just setting up something that never happens, and I've heard people be disappointed by that. But Paprika, by the way, is like has a lot of the Inception ideas, like about 3 or 4 years before Inception, by the way.
Well, so did this movie.
Oh yeah, this too. And I love Inception, and I don't mind that it uses an Uncle Scrooge comic book or Satoshi Kon movies. That's fine, you can use influences.
Yeah, they don't own that. No one owns the and maybe that'll be my last note on this too, is that NLP nested loop. That is kind of a very complicated version of a nested loop, is the Inception movie itself. It's just starting one story and then putting a story inside of it before you finish it, and then another one inside of that one before you finish that. And then as the movie or the story progresses, you slowly resolve each one from the inside out. And that's sort of what happens in this particular movie, although this one feels a little bit less linear. It feels, again, almost like a Tarantino movie in some ways.
Yeah, this one's kind of artier. Like, I mean, it was successful, but it was not like a major financial success in Japan or in the States or anywhere. It made some money, more than they expected, because it was supposed to be a weird throwaway, and it got a lot of critical acclaim, but it's not like some, major hit or anything.
Well, you're not putting this one on for the family.
Oh, no. Okay. 90 million yen. Okay. Made for less than $1 million, about $800,000 in 1997. In the box office in the US and the UK is less than that, 768. I'm not even sure it made but it made money. I don't know if it made money at all, but maybe it broke even at best.
Well, they don't care about money in Japan. They care about just like the love of the craft out there. Right?
In this case, that's I think that is kind of it, though, because it was meant to just, make a few dollars and vanish. And here we are watching it 25, almost 30 years later,
I mean, I actually watched mine for free. It was on YouTube. I just searched for for Perfect Blue full movie English dub, and bam, there it was. No ads or anything.
Yeah, rock on. And I feel like, if YouTube didn't like it, they'd take it down, right? But
which is crazy too, because
down other videos.
I'm making sure to intentionally mince my words a little bit. Like, I don't want to say what actually happens on that stage in that strip club, because that could be censored. But at the same time, I saw the actual movie on the platform that would maybe not let me talk about what I saw on their platform. So I almost too feel like I am in a weird Kafka-esque story within a story. Like I am inside of an Inception in some way.
Triple standards. There we go. I guess we will wind down for today, and for the listener or the viewer, next week you will be visiting my not my hometown, but the town I've been living in for a long time, with Summer Wars animates locations in my city and trains and things like that. So
I'll try not to get kicked out or get you in trouble.
Right. That's kind of the weird thing. Not weird, but something very different about Japanese animation. There might be a little bit of in this movie, but locations are a big thing. Like, it's like, here's a location, but they animate it, right? They didn't film there or anything. It's just they recreated it in the movie. So, but you will find things for more modern animes, like here is the site the anime is used, and they'll show you the picture and then the animated version side by side or whatever. So,
yeah, you mentioned they actually have like location scouts, which I still don't understand, but I accept it
because they're going to photoreal make it. Yeah. How about on your end? What are you making? You're making lots of things. Choose one or two. I guess.
I mean, I'm actually going to do a throwback, since this one does come up often in the context of Project Monarch and Mind Control. I'm issue 3 of my Time Sampler series, which you can find at paranoidamerican.com. Time Samplers was the very first comic series that I put together, like long running series. And in issue 3, it completely breaks down the entire process of Project Monarch programming, a la John Todd, Fritz Springmeier, maybe a few other sort of like very fringe conspiracy theorists. But it shows the very real process of how they create these altars, what type of trauma they use, how they procure the people that go through this. Part of it happens in the comic book in this place called Dignity Colony, which is a city in Chile, which was kind of founded after the Vatican Nazi rat line. It gets super deep, but if you want to see how that all plays out in a fairly funny comic book that doesn't take itself too seriously, Nazi rat lines and Project Monarch trauma programming, then you should definitely check out the Time Sampler series. And yeah, you can find it on paranoidamerican.com. It's also on Amazon. So that's probably my best contribution to this topic, and that has my thoughts and my research way better than I could ever verbalize it, because the best way that I know how to communicate is still through comic books.
All right. On my end, a lot of the movies we've been talking about today, other than Occult Disney, I do the Films and Filth, where actually we've talked about Perfect Blue before. We've talked about Inception there, although that was like 5 years ago. Who knows what we said there? But yeah, that's Films and Filth. I talk about the Twilight Zone at Time Enough podcast. You can find all that at podcastius.org. Thomas, don't you want to make music again? Why are you doing this? You should be singing and dancing.
I actually worked on a Perfect Blues song. Maybe I'll throw it in the credits or something. But I was inspired to make and then I made a Totoro song. But I'm not as happy with the Totoro song yet.
Oh well, we'll see. We'll see how those roll. But for now, a feeder saying, I guess.
Paranoid. Yo. I scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real to real. You will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hey, maybe your language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers. Evade them, whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Man, it's not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when the beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.